We are back again for the final segment. So I'll start this off very quickly. Is that you beeping, by the way, with this fucking constant beeping? Is it like you playing a video game and collecting coins or some shit with that stupid ape you have in your background?
No, it's my WhatsApp.
Oh, okay. Well, pause the WhatsApp, man. It's driving me nuts. Um, sorry, the beer's talking. I don't drink that much anymore. Uh,
Clearly, just
it's a nice IPA though. It's a Altamont, man. I love this brewery. It's called the Maui Wowie. It's like the only beer the only brewery I've been that has like a 420 theme. It's like a Rasta brewery, so it's like everything's kind of geared around marijuana. It's kind of interesting. Um,
California.
in any regards, okay. So I'm going to preface this whole segment by saying I love this league. Honestly, I joined it 2 years ago. Didn't know what to expect. I think for me, if I had to pick one league to stay in for, and I only had one choice, it would be this league. The reason being is I've always wanted to play against the best, fantasy managers in the world. I wanted the experience that was as close to being a GM as possible. I think this delivers on it. I think where some of the issues arise are we're all passionate and kind of type A personalities, or a lot of us are, and there's a lot of different ways to do things, and not all of them are correct, but there's also always a right way of doing things that has to be the standard, right? And in a league this complicated, I think where I have some of the biggest issues are in transparency and how information is being shared and tracked and released, who's doing those things, and then holding those people accountable. And then also, I'm not a fan of one person having any more control than needs to, just because there's dynamics involved when decisions are made that can impact the entire league, and there's a competitive aspect to this. And so that's why I was always in favor of a committee. I think it breaks up the responsibilities for people. It allows different kind of engagements to happen. And I also think that in the chats, it just gets so convoluted with so many people talking and not following the entire threads, and then they're not recognizing things. And there's no more perfect example than what happened in week 14 when Moose lays out a perfect strategy, or not perfect, the best strategy that you can possibly come up for that scenario, is very detail oriented in it. It's published in that way. It's then agreed upon, and then there's a different ruling after. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. And so I think if I had one complaint, it's just in those categories: transparency, and making sure that we're all on the same page when important issues are being talked about, and having a set group of people that's either voted on by the league and or kind of based off of tenure or whatever it is, that are in charge and responsible for the rules. And so I think we're getting there, but I do definitely think that there needs to be improvements.
Yeah. So, yes, the week 14 thing was egregious. I mean, it's probably the worst thing I've seen in the history of any of these leagues. It was very mishandled. And that was just because there was confusion on what was supposed to be meant by the ruling by the commissioner. So this comes down to this, in my opinion, is we vote and change too much shit. But if we're going to continue to do that, when something gets voted on, there needs to be like a message post that says, this is what the rule is, and this is going in the rule book. Does anybody object to the translation of this? Something like that. Because what we do is we have a bunch of shit that just gets voted on, and now we got a guy who just gets to choose what he thinks it means. But he's looking at the poll.
You're right. The language has to
He's
be approved, and then it needs to
looking
get
at the
implemented.
poll as the language when the proposal of the poll was from Moose's MB post. But Moose's MB post didn't apply to the rule change. The poll was just a poll, and then there was a translation made. And that can't happen. If you're going to cut it short and say, hey, the rule we're voting on is this, this, and this, it needs to be followed up with like, this was voted as this what is what's going in the rules.
Yeah.
Who disputes it? And then Moose can say, wait, that's not what I meant. I meant this. And then we clarify it and revote or whatever we have to do. But being in this position where our commissioner is looking at poll results and then making a translation on something that was thoroughly discussed through message board threads is bad. It's just so bad because he's just trying to make a quick decision to get to but now we're like talking about, okay, go back to last year's site and sift through a bunch of shit, which I'm just going to say isn't that hard because I did it a few days ago for the last like 3 years. Like,
so if I'm hearing you and summarizing what you're saying correctly, we're saying that the voting process needs to be clear first and foremost. There shouldn't be more than two options in a vote, right? Because if it's a majority rule, you shouldn't have, one side leading the other in most cases, right? It should be cut and dry. And then you finite that process with other votes or whatever you need to do. And then once there's a general ruling on which the direction is going or has been voted on, you need to have a proposal of the actual rule and the verbiage that is signed off on by the committee or whoever else is involved in making that decision. And listen, you can't open it up to everybody because everybody's fucking but it has to be decided on by a factor, and then it immediately needs to go into the rule book. There's no more, let's wait and see, we'll update it whenever we have time and all that. Listen, that is a problem. And that is a general problem that we have. It's a responsibility for the commissioner to keep shit tight, period, point blank. Like I know Dan's a busy person. That is the whole point of this might be too much for him to handle, right? Like as one person. And if he doesn't want help, then you have to be judged on the job that you're doing and making things clean, precise, cut and dry. So there's not these issues that we're running into.
Yeah. I mean, we just put too much shit to vote. Too much shit gets like thrown into vote without anyone thinking consequences of what it's going to happen. And then a bunch of people hoorah, so it gets passed. And then we have results that, oh, I didn't think about that. And there's tons of fucking shit wrong with it. And now we're in a shitstorm of interpretation. But like, if something gets passed, it needs to be like, this is going into the fucking rule book.
Right.
Do you have any questions about the translation when we get that time? And everybody can speak up. Well, what happens in this? What happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? Oh, okay, let's decide that. And if we can't decide it, we'll vote again.
Well, most of that is discussed, right? Like in the conversations before the vote happens. So it's then just like, is this the correct verbiage? Is this what we mean by this rule? And then the people that kind of were on that side say, yes, that's it. Otherwise you're opening it back up for more debate. So I get, some of it, but
and that was a case that Moose's message was should have been cut and pasted.
And it is now. So that's what makes it egregious, right? It now is the rule, and it was kept exactly the same. So what was the interpretation?
For a super pot ruling.
It makes no I mean, it makes no sense. But whatever. We talked about that. The other aspect that kind of ties into that is the fact that BC is a unique animal that is different from Thrones. It's different than CK, right? If we continue to treat BC with the common rules of all the other leagues, we're going to have problems because it's just different. It's a different animal. There's different, things that are impacted by the rules that we're making, and that has to be considered. I understand Dan wants consistency across the leagues because it makes things easier for owners, but fucking too bad. Right? Like this is there's no other league like it out there, period. So you have to treat it like that.
There's two levels of this. If we find an issue in BC, it may or may not exist in the other leagues. Okay, so I'm okay with Dan bringing up issues and fielding questions on whether or not they should be addressed, right? Like we voted in this league. Does this make sense in this league? I'm not okay with agenda pushing to try and make something happen in another league. Okay, and then what happens with over trying to make them consistent is certain things start falling through the cracks, and then I get a little, I don't know, not super stoked on the way things are being tracked in this league. And the good example is the rule that if a player is suspended for 8 games, that you can drop them or put them down on your taxi squad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or on your injury reserve. I voted for this. I think that should be a rule. And I believe it passed in contract killers and it passed in,
It didn't pass in BC is the point.
it did not pass in BC, but it is in
The
the
rule book.
rules.
Right.
Why? But why? Is it like, did Dan make the mistake? Is Dan just trying to not have this?
He has said in the
Like,
past
what is going
that
on?
he is going to take the rulings across all leagues to make it as consistent as possible into consideration
Why
when
are we
he's
voting
ruling.
for anything?
Yeah,
Like, why are we voting for anything?
I agree. I don't get it. I mean, the reason being is because of the finite amount of players, the contracts involved, the sparsity of players, right? Like the rulings have to be different. It impacts the league differently. Like that there's nobody that can argue differently. There's not a pool of players waiting in the free agency market, and it's just different, man. Like, so I just don't understand. Yes, there want to be some basic consistencies. We play in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen together. It's basically the same as CK and Thrones. There's some subtle nuances, but we're savvy enough to figure there's some different contract, things and blah blah blah. It's not the same league. It's not meant to be the same league. But we're smart enough to figure that out between the leagues, right? So I don't care if Thrones and CK are run the same way. I'm sorry for those that aren't involved in those, but BC should not be run the same way. It should not have mutual rulings that are treated differently or this are put into effect because the other two leagues did so. It just has to be its own animal, in my opinion. And
Like
maybe
common
that's a
rule
vote,
stuff that is clarification on old rulings is a little different, rather than changing something. If you're like, well, we didn't, this like was not well defined, so we need to, so if that's what you're trying to do across the leagues, that's fine. But each league, and this has been consistent since Chris ran these, each league had the common rule book, right? And a lot of the common rule book was very non-negotiable. And it's just like, that's kind of what the common rules have to be for structure. But then there's league specifics, and there would be a league site where would have the league rules. And that's where you would put all these changes. And it's okay for all these leagues to be drastically different in what they do, because there's another rule book where you can reference it. Right. And we are kind of in between this, like, common rule book should be the site rule book and everything should be consistent. And that's just not how it's ever been.
Okay, so let me ask a specific question to Dan or whoever wants to answer this, or you or whatever. Like, and welcome to have Dan on here. We're not Dan's enemy. We're just trying to make it an open conversation that is fluid, right? I think Dan is the right temperament for the job. I think he does a great job of being patient, allowing things to kind of develop sometimes, and he doesn't get overly emotional, which is a great tool in this league when dealing with certain personalities. But is it made consistent for the benefit of Dan, or is it made consistent for the betterment of the leagues? I believe it's made consistent for Dan's privilege, not for the best of what BC is. That's what I want Dan to speak to, right? Like, how is the rulings being consistent in BC and the other leagues better for BC? It's a simple question, right? If it is and I'm missing it, then so be it. If it's just for Dan and so he doesn't have to think differently from one league to the next, then that's his problem. It's not our problem.
I mean, that's all good said and done, but we're also just dealing with a lack of detail. Okay. And this is across all 3 leagues. And these are details on the infrastructure that was given to us by Chris that had been maintained. And I will go over multiple of these details that we do not have access to as Blue Chip. That is a very serious problem, in my opinion. We don't have access to payment transparency. of actual monies being transacted. We have no access to that. Okay. That was done on a League Link site that was done through MFL by Chris previously. Okay. That actually isn't being done in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I'd actually like to bring this up there as well. But there's a tool to enter everyone's payment, the time they make it, and what it's for. And then you can go and audit. If I want to audit that everyone's paid and everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and there's not mistakes made, it's not on one guy and our honor system that he's not missing this. And it's not saying he would do it intentionally, but
No.
happens, man. And like, fuck, man, if we made an audit system, give it to somebody else. Give it to Penn, be our auditor, whatever. Just like the delegation can happen a lot easier if the tools that were in place are being used. Another one is salaries and cut salaries. There was a master sheet that Chris created that would go across all teams and all the cuts where you can see this, and we can even bring it up. I don't think we have the time to do it right now. Maybe I'll do that when I can go over it even with Dan if we need to. But like those in the league links, if you go back to 2018 on the site, you can find it. And if you go to all links, you can see that there was a transparency page where you can see where all the cuts are, all the cuts and all the cap hits. And so it's so easy for me to go and look at this and look for an error there than it is for me to just say, okay, now I make my own spreadsheet. Now I have to do my own calculations. Now I have to figure out my own.
It's too much, especially when you're trying to track new owners too, right? Like, I mean,
also why when somebody already has to do the work? There is a sheet. Dan does have it. We don't have access to it.
That's right.
Why not?
Right.
We should have access to it. It should just be a Google sheet that goes in the league links. You go to league links and you click it and you look at it, and then you double check your salaries, and then you say, hey, there's a mistake here. And then another one that is in the past, I think he's emailed it to us, but he didn't do it this year, was the prices for holdout, transition tag, and franchise tag, and how those were calculated. That also used to be an Excel sheet that would be in the league links. You can go historically again and go back and look at these, and you can see they're printed. All the players, their names and their salaries and the averages. All the stuff is there. So we had one of the leagues where like Chris Godwin was holdout and it wasn't put or something like that, right? So like these types of mistakes don't happen when you have people checking your work on a league link and not checking your work to see if you're doing it wrong. They're just trying to get their own information.
Yeah, this isn't got you shit, right? Like, I don't even care if there's information in there that's wrong, but we have to have a starting point moving forward that's clean, and there's a process in place, not only for the owners that, you know, are avid in this league and are very detail oriented, but for the new folks as well. Like when I first started, I haven't even done that. I haven't even gone back and checked. I just assumed that it was correct and that the system did it, but I know now that that is not the case. But I didn't know how you could track this or where the information was. So also just to that point, you and I can do a better job of doing some of that 101 kind of sidebar podcast to where we can talk about some of those things. And like, because if we want to get better as a league and onboarding new managers and make it a better user-friendly experience for them and keep people here long-term, like I think some of that, betterment of other owners is necessary, right?
Yeah, and again, like if we give the tools to everybody to have the information, because the thing is, even if we do get it in an email, that stuff gets lost so easy,
Yeah.
And so like I just, when I started just looking into it, I'm like, man, I always had access to this sheet. And then you go to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and it's in those league links. It's like consistently been doing since he took over for Chris. And I can and cap tracking's a real son of a bitch, man. Like you're dropping players mid-season, you're not tracking that. And so when that gets inserted into a sheet and you can go look at it and people can check each other, that's good. That helps the auditing process for the commissioner.
Yeah. But the question is, and here's what I don't understand, because it's become obvious in the council chat thing, that there's people that are offering help, right? There's people that are offering to clean things up that want to invest more of their time in order to take on some of these responsibilities. And it seems as though Dan is resistant to that. And so I don't understand why, if it's gotten a little bit sloppy and the information, we're able to do some of these things for transparency and for the betterment of the league, then why are we not accepting help? Okay, that's question one. Or then when is the improvements going to be made? When is it going to be more automated in how we're doing things? Okay, it's April 1st. We now have the start of the new season. 3 days later, 5 days later, whatever it is, everybody's going to have their report. Then they're going to check their numbers. Then by May 1st, it's on a calendar. All corrections need to be made. Then 2 weeks later, then it needs to be cleaned up and very regimented on how we're doing these things and who's responsible for them.
Well, here's the biggest point too. Chris used to get paid to do this. Like he would get his entries fee for free, and some people had strong opinions against that. And I would like to tell all those people who were against it and pissed off that he was getting paid, look at where we are now. When you don't pay somebody to do work that they're accountable for, as far as giving transparency, they don't have to. I'm not getting paid for this. Dan's not getting paid. Well, who the fuck are you, man? I'm doing my best. And
Right, I agree.
isn't that wrong? But what my point is, if that's the case, the answer isn't just deal with it. The answer is let's get these tools and all this infrastructure where in place as it should be. And hey, Penn, guess what? Whether you like it or not, you're on the community. Pick one. Do you want to manage cuts, or do you want to manage the holdouts? And it's like something you do once a year or update a couple times a year, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like you're telling somebody to like take on a weekly job. But these things are falling through the cracks and they don't need to. And specifically, Dan might not need to like take the burden of all of this just because he's the commissioner, because he's not getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But because he's not getting paid for it is not an excuse for it not happening.
You're absolutely right. Like there's avenues to correct things. There's avenues to make it better. There's people that want to invest time. There's non-ego driven people that want to invest time too, right? Like, and there's people that are level-headed that want to invest time. Not everybody is a perfect fit for every job, but I think if you're not going to accept that help, then things need to improve, and we need to understand why you're not accepting the help. That's it. It's very simple, right? And then we move on, and we make it as best as we can. But I think that action needs to kind of start pretty soon for a lot of us, right? I think it's gotten pretty dire, and it's hard to be positive about things when you're not getting necessarily clear reasons as to why, or what's going to be coming down the pipeline to make improvements. Is that fair? Or
because these issues we keep coming up with, and more importantly, like again, like you said, like you want to get new guys coming in and stay. But if a new guy comes in, doesn't have access to like historical salaries, doesn't have understanding of where this franchise numbers are coming from, other than like, well, you told me that's
right.
What it is.
Absolutely.
It's like, how can I understand the process as a new owner so I understand where all this is meant, and that it's intention good, and that it's in my best interest, right? And instead of just assuming that somebody's got spreadsheets in their private computer and you're just going to have to assume they're okay and right.
Yeah.
And like Dan should.
Yeah, and it's not, and this is not
he shouldn't be in that position.
He shouldn't. That's my whole question on this. And this is not like a coup or anything. Like I'm a Dan fan, to be perfectly honest with you. Like I have nothing against Dan. I have a problem with the control. That's it. And I don't understand why Dan wants the control. I don't understand why Dan wants the control while sacrificing quality and efficiency and transparency, right? Like, so that's my issue. But I will speak to this. Because I don't know how much more time we have. Fucking, we got to stop living in the past too. There's people out there and they know who they are, Georgia. Like we got to stop hitting the people over the fucking head because we have a personal issue with them, or things haven't been done perfectly, or whatever. Like, if we want to move forward into the future, everybody needs to make improvements. We can't have situations where Cocaine Bear is fucking flying off the rails and using some of the language he has. Like, I don't have a tolerance for that shit anymore. Like, new people in this league aren't going to find it funny. Like, so if we really want to call out one person or others, then we all have to look in the mirror and hold ourselves a little bit accountable for our actions. And like, I'm trying to do better as a person. I'm trying to be more positive and not say stupid shit at 1 o'clock in the morning, like as much as I used to. Trying to be more interactive with people in trades and not be such a dick in those regards. But fuck, man, like give it a rest sometimes. Like continually hitting the same note over and over and over is fucking lame as fuck for a 30-year-old. As a 50-year-old, you should be fucking embarrassed of yourself, to be perfectly honest with you.
Right. Okay. Well, I would just say, for me personally,
Just kidding, Georgia.
no, you're not.
No, not really.
I would just say personally, and this is just going to speak to everyone, and if it applies to you, great. But when we're trying to clean our fucking room, stop dumping new shit in there. Okay? We're trying to
That's a
clean our fucking room
perfect
right
analogy.
now. Okay? There's diarrhea and vomit and fucking nasty shit on our floor.
Right.
Let's clean our fucking goddamn room first, and then let's start maybe even talking about making rule changes.
Yeah.
But like, I understand that we want to do this in super pot year cycles and there's some urgency, and that's fine if that's going to be the discussion. But for me, it's just like, we don't even have our shit together. Like, we don't have our shit in order, and we have shit that is voted against that is like, we need to just iron out the goddamn rule book with what exists.
Right.
And then fine, we can have conversations and talk about it, but shit, I just really don't
There's
want
not
to
that many
do
things that need to be fixed, though, Ben. Like transparency.
everything else is preference.
It's all
And
being done in other spots. We've seen it in other leagues. These things they're doable. Like you have to have a starting
yeah,
point.
but again, like when we start talking about like tinkering with rosters or we just need to
Fuck all
stop.
that noise. You're absolutely right. Fuck all that noise. Like the diarrhea of the mouth sometimes too. Like sometimes people just want to argue. And I get Dan's point and his resistance. It's like not everything's freaking, fire drill. Like I think it's impossible to please every single person in this league because everybody sees things differently. But fucking use some common sense, people. Like not everything has to be dire, and you don't have to just win the argument to win the argument, right? Like sometimes some of that shit's just noise. And so that's why I also thought the council would be kind of prevalent, because they could have taken input from people that are within a division, clear out all the noise, focus on what's important, be level headed, bring it to the attention of the 6 leaders or whatever it is, make sound decisions, and then move on. Like, because the noise is always going to be there. It's just how you fucking handle it. And I just think that we've gotten away from what the fun aspects of this league in the chat room and interaction is just talking football. And now it's just a bunch of people talking a bunch of shit. And I think that's, I mean, honestly, it's made me want to lose interest in it, to be perfect, to
Yeah,
be
and
clear.
I guess again, like the more we keep having these fucking discussions and trying, like, it's okay to make the league better, but the more we like are constantly passing rules without having like that be that, and then it just goes into a fucking rule book, and now we're having discussions about it, and it's going all over the place, and now fucking people are coming in, checking in for the first time to fucking franchise our players, and like, what the fuck is this
Yeah.
league? What are the
They should
rules?
know.
What did you do? What
Yeah.
did you guys do? Where can I go look at what the league rules are now? And like,
All new
feeling
league
it.
league rules are voted on and decided by June 1st, are in the rule book. That is what you look at before June 1st. That's how you know to make your decisions, or
And they're
whatever it
voted
is, right? Like,
on. Put a message about post. This ends in 72 hours. If you have any conflict to any translations of this rule, post it now. Nobody does. It's in the fucking book. Shut up and move on.
yeah.
That's how it should be. But
What
we're having
about
discussions on shit that was voted on last year.
here's an idea for fucking a little bit of transparency. Everybody needs to provide a cell phone number, and you're on fucking WhatsApp or
Oh,
whatever, like, or to the commissioner, at least, to where you get a message sent to you for deadlines or something, to where there's no excuses, right? People receive the information. I don't know what it is, but also if you have it, I don't know, I don't want to get into that, but I don't know, there has to be, the communication process can be cleaned up. There's notifications, there's everything, there's no real excuse. But you're absolutely right, that the timelines need to be set, and people need to have an expectation of when they need to be checking in and when they don't need to be checking in, and when rules are going to be consistent and when they're not going to be consistent. It's like, it's just too all over the map. And I agree with that. So I don't know. what else do you want to say in regards to the State of the Union? We got 9 minutes left. I don't want this to be a negative session. I want it to be positive. What do you think the next steps are?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of panic on filling the league super fast, which I think is funny. And we only have 3 openings. I think that's the best we've had in the history of
Yeah,
this league.
that's positive.
And that's despite everything I said about the fucking fire and rain of fucking the Armageddon, only 3 people left, so probably isn't doing that bad. So to Dan, we're not here to just say fuck this league up and shit's wrong and whatever. Don't take it that way, and nobody else listening to this should. We are talking about getting tools, transparency, and process. That's it. Just so this stuff gets put to bed, so we're not looking in chat, you know, the chat and random message board posts going left and right, having fucking repeated discussions. It's just really
Yeah,
dumb.
it's just the chat shouldn't even be open for that shit. It's like I don't care about it. I want it to be talked about like football and how's everybody doing kind of stuff. It's like use the message board or whatever for your arguments with whoever you want to create arguments with. I don't like talking shit or whatever, that's fine. Like I just the energy got sucked out of the room a
Well,
little bit
you know what
and
I
it's
would,
just
I would do, honestly, Corey. This is what I think should happen. April 1st. Actually, no, because that's the new league year. There should be a 30-day period where rule changes are discussed, voted on, and executed, and nothing happens during the year, ever. To
yeah,
be
only
sure. But you cannot
abnormal
change a
situations
fucking thing about the
like the
league
Bills
except for
game or
1
something
month.
like that.
And
Yeah.
then everyone's got to get engaged that month. That might be what we have to do. But right now, fucking looking at these polls and the dates that they were done and how over the map of fucking last year, I want to kill myself. It's just like, how do
Yeah.
we
Well,
this
yeah, I agree.
throughout the league, not refine it? And then now we're sitting here going like, what's the rules? And that's not cool. Like we need to be better at that process. That's my point.
I agree. Yeah. I think listen, I think everybody needs to take
And
a
that way, sorry, not to interrupt you, Corey, but that way we can tell Georgia to shut the fuck up and save it for the month that
yeah,
he.
and like as much as hard as I am on Georgia, like I like Georgia. Like I've like I've said many times, I've gotten to know Georgia outside of fantasy football and
Trying to
talking
make the
on the
league better
phone
in
and
his own way.
he's not he's a personality in the league. He's not that person necessarily outside of the league. I think I'm hard on him because I like him and it is what it is, and I want other people to appreciate him. And I know other people do. Um, yeah, I just think that it's time to press the reset button and kind of move on from the past, like we move forward into the future. I think Dan, we'd love to have you on the pod and have an open discussion and give your point of view if you'd like to do it. I don't see why you wouldn't. We're not
Yeah.
here to bash anybody. I don't think Ben and I have really ever done that. I think we're passionate about the league and moving it forward and making it better. And I think the majority of people are. And again, as much as I kind of get on Georgia, like he's pretty smart. He's been around this league for a long time and he does understand some of the consequences. I think he does have less of a personal agenda than people maybe think he does. I think he does kind of foresee things and how they've gone and understands the history of this league a little bit. I think there's a lot of smart guys in this league too. Moose is extremely smart. Mike's extremely smart. Roman and Ben are extremely smart. Highland.
Gates is about to write us some algorithms for our fucking
Yeah,
scheduling.
hometown. I mean, like there's some guys that kind of get it and want
Good
to
league,
be.
man. It's got a lot of good people in it and a lot of fucking competitive motherfuckers, dude. I
Yeah, yeah,
apparently haven't
and
been able to beat yet.
we don't want it to go anywhere. That's the overwhelming theme of what we're talking about. And I think that we just kind of lost a little bit of our momentum. We were flying pretty high early part of the year last year. Everybody was pretty excited about the podcast. We'd love some more interaction here too. Like, I mean, fucking, I think that's what happened to Ben and I. If we're a little bit ego driven, we only have 8 views of a podcast that you put 3 hours into. I think that's tough to stomach. So welcome your guys' feedback. Like if we're only going to get 8 views, we're
When
going
we
to
put
charge
those
some
beginner
cash.
videos, those things will pop like at least 20 hits.
What was that?
If we put those beginner videos together, we'll get like 20, 30 hits off
Well,
of that.
there's some very tenured folks that probably need to go back and watch the beginner videos anyway. But Anyway, it's good to be back in the seat with you, my man. Let's try to keep these going as much as possible. If anybody has some suggestions and well, actually, let's not do that. Let's just hope that we get a response from Dan and the commissioner, and he kind of sees us as some voices of reason talking directly to him in a somewhat clear manner, and that we all work together to make this a better league. So
Yeah, yeah, man. And then if anything, if you want to help, get this organized and be a part of doing it, just speak up and say, Dan, I want to help. I know some people have, but just
yeah, I think that's the first line of order, right? Like figuring out why the help isn't being accepted, and then getting a response on the transparency tools and why those aren't in place already, and when there are going to be. I saw that Dan did mention that he was going to
said he was
release
going to
that
put
stuff, so
some key.
that's good. I mean, I think that's a good start, right? And then we have it in place, and we just kind of move forward piece by piece. So,
Cool,
all right,
bud.
my man, have a great Easter weekend. Love you. Good talking to you again. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
All right.